What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. One of those of the podcast. My name is Kyle Dabro, and in today's segment, we are going to give our first impressions of the upcoming championship games in the NFL this weekend. It's pretty simple. We've got the NFC Championship that is going to feature the San Francisco 49ers going to Philadelphia to play the Philadelphia Eagles. In the AFC Championship, we have the Cincinnati Bengals going to Kansas City to play the Kansas City Chiefs. So the way that we'll work this out is Kevin will go over the NFC Championship game. I will go over the AFC Championship game. Since the NFC Championship game is going to take place first on Sunday, we'll go over that first, and then after that, we'll go over the AFC Championship game. So, Kev, to kick this one to you, give me your first impressions of the upcoming NFC Championship game on Sunday.
I mean, frankly, this is probably the best matchup you could have gotten in the NFC. Two of the better defenses, obviously two dynamic quarterbacks that are finding ways to get it done. Great head coaches, both of them in the candidacy for Coach of the Year. Obviously both have narratives in their own respective teams. Jalen went down a couple of weeks ago with a shoulder injury. They almost lost the 1 seed. You go and you lose Trey Lance at the beginning of the season, then you lose Jimmy Garoppolo. You're onto your third string quarterback for San Francisco, and he finds a way to go and lead this team into an NFC Championship appearance. I mean, you have an injury to Lane Johnson. Trent Williams was hurt earlier. These teams are very similar in a lot of regards, and they have talent on the outside in terms of in the wide receiver core. You got the speedy slipster and Brandon Ayuk. You obviously have Devontae Smith, the great route runner. Then the big receivers for each team, of course, is going to be Deebo Samuel and A.J. Brown. They have great tight ends, of course, in Dallas Goedert and George Kittle. Great running backs, Miles Sanders, Christian McCaffrey. I mean, these teams are so identical to a lot of deeper reasons. I think this is going to be a very entertaining game, but I do think it's going to be more of a defensive game just for the sake of both quarterbacks are very inexperienced in the postseason. Maybe Jalen has a little bit of an edge because he's a little bit more dynamic with what he can do with his legs. But overall, this game is going to be must-see TV no matter what fan you are. I mean, we're talking about the Eagles, the number 1 seed, and the freaking 49ers, the number 2 seed. It's genuinely the battle of two juggernauts in the NFC. And I truly and honestly can't wait to watch it because again, like I said in the beginning, I don't think there could have been a better matchup to go to the Super Bowl.
As for the AFC Championship game, I think it's going to be very similar to what Kev had just outlined for the NFC Championship game. I think this is going to be a very competitive matchup when we see the Bengals go on the road to play the Chiefs in Arrowhead Stadium. I'll start with the Chiefs first, just to break it down between both teams. KC, their biggest thing going into this game for me is the status of Patrick Mahomes. He suffered that high ankle sprain against the Jags last week. And even though that he did come back in that game, you could definitely tell that he was hindered by that ankle. Granted, he did get some points on the board, but just their offense was a little bit out of rhythm because of that injury. And going into this week, Casey's main point of emphasis is going to be able to protect Patrick at all costs. They have to make sure that they try to stymie that Cincinnati pass rush, which can be known to get some effective pass rushes against opposing quarterbacks. And the main reason behind that is they just don't want to get into a situation where Patrick could potentially re-aggravate that injury in this upcoming AFC Championship game. And I think, when it comes to their offense as a whole, I think there may be more of an emphasis on running the ball with Isaiah Pacheco. And we've seen Pacheco be able to rip off some pretty good carries from time to time. And then they also have Jerick McKinnon in the background, in the backfield as well. So I think they're going to heavily focus on those two guys in particular. And I think the reason why is they're going to try to get Patrick into a situation where all of the pressure is not going to be on him. It's going to be divided amongst Patrick a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if the running backs get a decent amount of the workload. And it's just because, Patrick's done a great job in his tenure with the Chiefs to be able to extend plays with his feet. But because of that ankle injury, more than likely he's going to be just focused with inside the pocket. And I wouldn't be surprised if Casey's offense kind of morphs into a more run-heavy attack going into this game than Patrick, because Patrick, I just don't know how effective he's going to be from the pocket. We'll see as time goes on, and he's practicing this week, which is a good note for him that he's not dealing with any sort of lingering ankle issues. He's not in a walking boot. He's not in crutches. So the fact that he's getting practice in this week is pretty solid for him. But yeah, the KC part is mostly predicated for Patrick's health status going into this game for me. As for the Bengals, the biggest thing with them is just continue the dominance that they had against the Bills. They were phenomenal against Buffalo last week. Going on the road, And holding Josh Allen and that potent Bills offense to 10 points was awesome to watch. Joe Burrow had absolutely cooked that Bills defense last week, and the Bills defense is one of the best defenses in the NFL. And going up a defense like KC, which has been known to give up points in significant chunks from time to time, I think that could be a favorable matchup for the Bengals as we get closer to game day. And from a defensive perspective, they have to ramp up the pass rush. I think if they're able to get Patrick a couple times, not only pressure him, but to actually get sacks, I think it's going to throw that KC offense into a little bit of a tailspin, knowing that Patrick is hurt. And also, I think their secondary as a whole can kind of creep up if their pass rush is really getting home. And I think that would really just compress Casey's offense as a whole, knowing that Patrick's dealing with that ankle injury. But there also could be an emphasis on trying to slow down the run game as well. If Casey decides to run the ball pretty heavily, maybe they focus on trying to stop the run game first and then making Patrick beat them, which is kind of crazy to say because usually it'd be the other way around. You try to slow down Patrick and then maybe you get into a situation where you could stack the box and then try to slow down Casey's run game. But this whole game has been flipped upside down for me just based on the injury that Patrick sustained. So the game plan for both teams, I think, is going to be a little bit focused on that. And I think it's going to be predicated on how effective Patrick's going to be. But overall, I think this is going to be a great game. I think both teams have an ample chance to advance to the Super Bowl. And we'll just kind of see how things play out when we get to Sunday when this game kicks off on Sunday evening.